Premier League. My name is Julian, and with me tonight, I think we're not on the screen right now, Anurag. Maybe you can fix that. So, what are we gonna see today? With me tonight, I have my good friend, Tomasz Vlacek, who I've known for a very long time. Tomasz, how's it going?
Very well. Thank you for having me, Julian.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show tonight. What are we gonna see tonight? Tonight, we're gonna have one of the most, like, I keep saying that every day, right? We got one of the most stacked groups in the entire league. We have Javier Dominugez, we have Bryant Gottlieb of the Arena Decklers podcast, we have Edgar Magalhães, and we have Eric Landon, the quote-unquote end boss of Legacy. So this is gonna be something else. We're in a minute we're gonna see what they are playing, but first of all, I think we're gonna take a look at our tournament structure. And Tomasz, we are gonna be commentating on the very first match of the night. So we got Edgar against Eric. And are you familiar with this kind of tournament format? Or I think we're just gonna go ahead and explain it to our viewers because this isn't really something you see in legacy tournaments, right? This we are more used to Swiss tournaments. Or have you seen something like this in legacy before?
Yes, please, Julian, enlighten us and tell us
Okay.
how this tournament works.
So what we're doing tonight is we're not gonna kick any player from the league. Instead, we're gonna have them play off in double elimination, and 2 players are gonna be heading to the winners bracket, and 2 players will end up in the lower or loser bracket at the end of the night. So we're not gonna lose anyone, but being in the winner bracket is a huge advantage because each win in the winner bracket basically counts for 2 wins in the loser bracket. So if you want to make it all the way to the finals and not expose yourself to a lot of variance, you better finish in one of the top 2 spots tonight. The easiest way to do that is you go 2-0, you go straight to the winners finals and then head to the winners bracket. Then you can go to bed. Good night, have a good time. Or you fight your way all the way through the loser bracket tonight and also join the other people in the winner bracket. So 2 chances for everyone tonight. If you lose twice, you're out. Once you get your second win, you have made it. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at the deck lists for now?
Yes, and
oh yeah. Or actually rather a Twitter poll. So Tomasz, is this something you would have expected? Like, it looks really close, right? Nobody's here. Who would be your pick?
Well, yes, my pick would be probably Javier Dominguez, I believe. But as you mentioned earlier, all these groups are like groups of death. So we can't say which group is harder, and here it's also very even.
Yeah.
And
Javier, our Twitter followers, they also picked Javier to be like the top dog. He's the world champion, right? He also won a Legacy GP. He's also, little known fact, he's the creator of Cephalid Breakfast, one of the most old school and coolest Legacy combo decks, I want to say. But we also got some gladiators, right?
I didn't know that. I only start hearing about Javier when he won the Legacy GP, and I thought the Cephalid Breakfast is really old deck, but I guess you know better.
It's been around for pretty much as long as I've been in Legacy. I think even a little bit longer. And I actually didn't know that until he played it in our last season, and people were like, "Hey, why is he playing that? That's pretty odd." But then we actually got some input that he's actually the mastermind behind that. For our other players, we're going to have Bryant Gottlieb of the Arena Decklers podcast. If you don't know the Arena Decklers podcast, definitely check it out. I think it's the biggest it's the biggest Magic podcast out there. He's doing it together with Cherry T. Probably like, you might have heard of Cherry T before. And he has joined our league. Very, very good player. For those of you, I think Bryant doesn't have a long history in Legacy, or maybe I'm not aware of it. But he's a really strong player. Also made it to Pro Tour, used to be pretty big, and now he's gonna be up in this group. But instead of those 2 players, we're actually gonna have our first match. We're gonna have Edgar and Eric, and those 2 guys. What have they brought to the table? I think Edgar, if you don't know him, he really made a name for himself. Not only on the SCG scene, but is Edgar still a gold level pro? I think that doesn't exist anymore, but he always used to be up there. And Eric, of course, Eric. Like, pretty much most of the people who have played Legacy in the last 2 years, they know about Eric. He really made a name for himself, grinding Magic Online leagues and getting something like absurd, like 86 trophies in 2 weeks or something. So yeah, he's going to be up against Edgar, and let's see what Edgar has actually brought to the table here. Okay, I remember working on this deck list, and this was a real pain to format. Edgar likes this one-offs, especially in his mana base. So he brought 4 Color Snow. That's a deck that you're actually very familiar with, right?
Yes, I try to play it. I really like it. I'm not sure if I can say I will cheer for Edgar because I really think the deck is very beautiful. I really like it, but I think it's missing something. I don't know how to describe it, but when I was playing it, I always felt there is something missing. So we'll see if Oko is the card that was missing, or um, or
I think it's
is it
Death
something
Shaman that's
else?
missing from this.
Yes, yes, pretty much. I'm not sure if that artifact can replace it, but it's a really sweet deck. I really like it, and I'm quite happy it exists. Maybe it's too greedy. Maybe it's too much that we have this kind of a deck with all the basics, but I don't mind. It's not as dominant as Check Pile was, so I think it's fine.
Yeah, that's a special feature of this deck, right? That you gotta run these snow covered basic lands. We don't really have snow covered dual lands yet. That would actually work really well with Archon's Astrolabe. And that's pretty much the Death Knight Shaman replacement of our times. Back in more than a year ago, actually, you already talked about it, Check Pile, the deck that made some really big waves in Legacy. That kind of went away, but Archon's Astrolabe brought it back. So is this Neo Check Pile? Is this we call it Four Color Snow? And people have said that Edgar actually looks like a very famous member of the Snow family. So it's gonna be greedy. It really wants to do a lot of things. It's got a huge, strong engine with 3 different planeswalkers. You already talked about Oko, right? Oko, Thief of Crowns. That's a deck. That's a card that is pretty much, I want to say, escaped most people when we initially did spoilers for the new sets. But now it's making a real impact. You said you like Oko. Is this something you play? I
Yes.
think you're also playing a pretty greedy deck in Legacy right now.
Yes, I'm. Yes, I'm. If I'm not playing Minic Fit and I'm thinking about Orconic Fit, I'm playing now Food Chain actually as we speak now these weeks, and before that I was playing this 4 color, and uh, I think Oko is really wonderful. I think there's this. It's a little bit tricky because it doesn't say draw a card, doesn't say put token into play, but it's more subtle, and that's why I think it was underrated. And for a lot of people, I remember in one of the podcasts, people were like, "Oh, Oko, let's not even talk about it. It's obviously not legacy playable, but it's a bit better than what we expected." That's what we thought, from the pre-release. But I think Oko is so good, and especially in the matchup that's coming, it might be the crucial card.
Yeah, that's gonna be something else, right? I guess nobody would have actually expected Eric to be on this. It's gonna be burned tonight. I already prepared Eric's deck list in my Photoshop file. I put in his regular reanimator list. I put in a background of Grizzlebrand, and then I get the message and I open the link and it's burn. I'm like, what? I have to do all this work again. So this is really gonna be something else. Eric really not known for playing burn, but certainly known for trying things in Legacy. He famously once 5-0'd with was it Soul Sisters? Is it even a deck? I guess he made it a deck at this point. So he's pretty he's pretty much a wild card. Like I wouldn't have put it beyond him to play something crazy, but Burn, that's Bob Wang level of crazy, I want to say. And for what I know, I think you played this matchup quite a bit. So what can you
Yes,
tell us about Burn against basically the least greedy versus the most greedy deck in the format?
yes, I played it because a friend of mine plays Burn um, when he feels like he wants to hate everybody, and it felt pretty miserable. It was really painful, and I even played like 3 Tarmogoyf in the sideboard, uh, what Edgar doesn't have, and it still felt terrible. It felt like you need to have like some kind of a discard, Tarmogoyf, Hydroblast, Snapcaster, Hydroblast, or otherwise you're not probably winning it. And um, apart from Oko, I don't really see many cards that Edgar can hope are going to save him. He has Hydroblast in the sideboard. Possibly, I'm not sure if you'll be bringing like the Leovold, because that can buy you some time. Because if they decide to ignore it, uh,
Yeah,
it might lose them the game. But I think game one, unless he draws Oko, I don't see the way how he can win. And we'll see.
yeah.
After board, he has one Hydroblast, so we'll see if that's going to be enough.
Yeah, and Eric has like 4 pyroblasts to even counter the Oko and the Hydro, so it's definitely going to be rough. And I think Eric made a pretty good metagame call. He correctly put Edgar on 4-color control, he told me, and he also put Javier on the deck that he will be playing later on. He didn't really guess correctly for Brian, I think, but I think we're about to get ready players already and head into the match and see how things are going to work out. We have Edgar Magalhães on the play, playing 4-color Snow against Burn. And what do we see in the opening hands? Like, we see a pretty solid opening hand from Burn. Of course, you would usually like to have Goblin Guide for the maximum damage output, but this is pretty solid, right? Turn 1 Suspend into turn 2 Eidolon, while Edgar doesn't really do. I mean, a lot of things hinge on this Ponder finding something. How do you like the Thoughtseize here?
Well, I mean, what can he do? Like, of course, you play Thoughtseize because you don't have removal, so you don't want like Goblin Guide or Swift Spear, like dealing too much damage. But it's just frustrating, just from the first, just from the first round. But he's going to play Astrolab. He's probably going to Ponder. So we will see what's going to happen. But yeah, it will be very difficult.
Yeah, you mentioned he really needs to find a clock. So we'll probably see the Snapcaster come down next turn unless he finds Oko.
Mm-hmm.
So Oko comes into play with how many counters? 4. So
It has 4.
technically,
If you plus it, it gets +2. So it's kind of +9 life, unless you're dying next turn. Yes, I mean that can be the card. If you find the card, you can win. Yes. But since the 4-color doesn't really play counter magic, I think it will be very hard.
oh god, look
But
at this. This is rough.
yes, but I think what's good for Edgar is that the burn doesn't have like a constant source of damage. There's no creatures, so
That's true. That's true. So the inevitability. That's actually one of my least favorite English words. Is definitely on
yes,
Eric's side, especially with Exquisite Firecraft not being able to counter that. That's gonna be rough, right? You will get down your Snapcaster. You have to put on some clock, or maybe Edgar actually goes ahead and completely forgoes the idea of having a clock and goes all in on those ponders, trying to find Oko and then Oko it up next turn. But that's also gonna be hard. Like, I don't really see him winning
yes.
the race.
Yes, but he chose differently, and he fetched, and he's going for Thoughtseize. Okay, that's a line as well, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one way to deal with the exclusive Firecraft.
Yeah, that's the end
Uh,
of the game, right? Pretty much. But the thing is that the burn player can wait, really. He like doesn't have to go for it, but yeah, that's the game. So it ended before it even started.
yeah, that's pretty much about how we would have expected it. Like, I kind of honestly, people say bad things about Burn, but come on, when you pick the deck as like a tactical tool because you think your opponents are gonna be greedy, I like people punishing greedy people. Like, you know me, I don't want it when people get overboard with how cute they want to build a deck. And of course, there's always, I mean, you know how it works, like in Legacy with matchups. If you play a heavy control deck and you're up against a range deck you're favored, but then when somebody brings something super aggressive along, like Burn, then you're like, oh, I can't even cast all of my cards until I'm dead. So, what are we seeing here for the sideboarding? We of course see the price of progresses coming. Are those extra price of progresses? I was actually hard to see, I think.
No, I don't
I
think
might
he had
be.
extra price progresses,
No.
but I think basically we got basically like a whole paper of Eric's thoughts about the matchup and why he chose his deck, so we kind of know everything. And he basically removed 2 price of progress from the main because he believed it might be not as good against the 4-color, and he put those to screw up the critics, you know. And
Yeah.
by the way, this deck list looks very much like the deck list that made top 4 in the GP in America. And in Eternal Glory podcast, there was a very nice interview of Anurag with the Burn player. And although I'm like a control player, I really like there's this guy who just loves playing Burn, and he plays it very well. And I really like his thoughts, like how to play around spell pierce, take your time sometimes. It was, I think Burn is much more complicated than people give it credit to. And He also played for Exquisite Firecraft, which is a lot of people have it only in the sideboard. He just decided I want to play 4 main, and I think that's where Eric is coming from.
Yeah, definitely. So something that's interesting, what Edgar is doing, he's actually bringing in Nahil's Spellbomb to clear Eric's graveyard, and I would assume that's so that he can remove Spell Mastery and actually counter the Exquisite Firecraft, which requires 2, I think, instant sorceries to be in the graveyard to be uncounterable. And they actually talked about it on our LPL
Yes.
channel before. They were discussing whether they should do it, and they were like, Edgar was semi-choking and Eric was semi-choking back, and I felt like, hey, you know what? I think he's actually going to do it because he can also take out a lot of stuff like Thoughtseize, for example.
Yes, but I think still the matchup is miserable. He's putting them in. Doesn't it's like you can have Thoughtseize, or it's not
Yeah.
going to be really great. So
A card that's going to be good for him is Leovold. Leovold not only allows him to draw basically a card for every burn spell that hits, it's also a clock. Of course, he would prefer
yes,
to cast it on the second turn, get by Death. Maybe it's time to bring back Lano Elves. Who knows?
or the goose
But yeah, oh, the
that can
goose.
work with Oko. Like 2
Okay,
different
now we
people
get
suggested
something.
to me today to play the goose, sorry, the goose. But I
So
think this
after
this
the goose is loose. We don't have Nimble Mongoose anymore, so now we have like, what's it called, the Gilded Goose?
yeah, the gilded goose. Well, now obviously the trouble with the 4 color that you start swamp and you don't have. Yeah. I think after the sideboard, I think you can go for the dual lands. I think it's kind of safe because he's definitely going to cut the price of progresses. You can obviously lose to it, but if you could play turn 2 Ren, I mean, it's a possibility. You can always get like ultimate, Colagant's command. Um, you need every edge in this matchup because now he's just going to Pyroblast.
Yeah. I was wondering what you actually want to spend your Force of Wills on in this kind of matchup, because like 80% of Eric's cards basically do the same or are uncounterable. So what is something you want to connect your Force of Will to in this matchup? Like obviously your turn 1 Goblin Guide, but what else? Like you probably won't counter Chain Lightnings.
Yes, I think this is obviously. I mean, you have to force here because that means you're getting a card and you get 3 life, pretty much, right? Because
Yeah.
you're still on 14, which is quite healthy, and he's going to ignore, that life total and is going for the face. That's what my burn friend did in one game, and if you draw like 5 cards, then you counter some of his spells on the way, you have a chance.
Yeah, yeah. It's the second run. I mean, even the first run doesn't really do much. I wonder whether it's actually a card you might even consider siding out, depending on
Yeah,
whether you
but
have something.
yes, but that's what we talk with the Nihil Spellbomb. Like you bring it in because you don't really have anything, and even there are quite a few cards that you might not even want, like for example Rain. And if you see, his hand, he already has what is it? Yes,
He's
what is the
loaded.
card?
He's got everything.
Yes, what
He's
is
got
the card
Exquisite
in the?
Firecraft, 2 Fire Blasts.
Yes. Okay, so the second card, the second from left is Fire Blast.
Yeah, he's got alternate art like you do when you
I
play
see.
Burn.
Yeah, I see. So pretty much already he has like 15 damage in his hand. And what's interesting that he decided not to kill the Leopold. So he's ignoring it. We'll
Yeah,
see
he's
if
basically
he will get.
saying, you get all the card advantage you want. I'm gonna kill you with 7 cards in hand. Thing. I like it. I like it when people have plans and they carry them through until, like, obviously there's, for most plans there's a point where you have to change to a different plan. But Eric right now, he's in go mode. He wants to hit the face, and he's got the burn space to do it, right?
Yes, but this is just. You can see how miserable it is. Like basically, he just has to draw Hydroblast and like the next 2 draws. Otherwise, it's just.
Basically, he needs to draw like running Hydroblasts and Snapcaster Mages to go with it. So yeah, it's definitely like, I can only really go back and appreciate to the balls on this guy to go out there and really just pick up a deck that some people, and I mean, decks in Legacy have reputations, and Burn doesn't always have the best kind of reputation, even though like a top 8 are GP just as of right now.
Mhm.
But it's a really good tool, especially when you know that the meta game is going to look something like this. And your first match in a double elimination tournament is going to be against Edgar. And it's so funny. Like, I asked all of our players why they picked their deck, and literally all of them said, well, I think Edgar was going to be on Four Color Snow. So he really carved that out from him. He really got this kind of reputation. And now Eric is moving in and punishing this really hard. And I like those bold choices. I really like them.
And I think, and let's face it, he's drawing pretty well as well. I think you need that.
Oh, yeah.
But if I come back to that podcast I mentioned, it's wonderful to hear when somebody really thinks about the deck like Burn. Like, what are the card choices? How I want to attack, my opponents. It's just, it's almost like an alchemy, there. Like, what we think is only with the Brainstorm decks or with Elf decks or with Storm. I think even Burn can reward a good place and good deck building.
Definitely, right? So, what is Eric thinking about here? So he's got Edgar on 5 life. He's got an uncounterable spell. He knows deck lists, so he knows that Edgar can't remove his graveyard. But maybe he's gonna do it on upkeep. Oh, he's waiting. Okay. I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen to him here? Like, Edgar could draw another Force of Will, but even that wouldn't really change anything.
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, we mentioned it. Like, he can draw Oko and just put him under, like, I have 3 life here, and what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Now he's just going to bolt him, and then yes, obviously Hydroblast. But now I think it's like a bolt end of turn, and then like the X with the Firecraft, and he draws Mountain. He can do double Fire Blast. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, it's just like, what can I say?
Honestly, maybe this is how he got all those trophies. Maybe Eric has secretly been playing Burn all the time, and then only on stream he's the GOAT reanimator guy. He's actually the GOAT, the Burn GOAT, the GOAT Burn. That's I almost named this deck GOAT Burn when I made the deck list.
It almost seems like Eric doesn't likes to play decks that don't care what your opponent is playing. I just
and that's
do
a
my
very
stuff.
strong line, right? In Legacy, especially if you go to big tournaments, I always appreciate that people pick strong strategies that punish weak draws. That's one of the very first things. Like, back then, when I didn't really know much about tournament magic, one of the first things that like good players told me, always try to punish, like, have a deck that is able to punish weak draws, and that's something I always appreciate.
Yes, now Mountain, and that's it.
It's double Fire Blast time. He's actually dealing 12 damage this turn if he wants to. That's absurd.
Yes. It's just, it's incredible. But maybe more people will play Burn, and it's a cheap deck. You can win with it, and some people like winning. Like I remember Eric said somewhere that he's not like emotionally attached to that reanimator deck. He just likes to win.
Yeah. And if you want to get that deck, you can definitely grab it from Card Hoarder. Card Hoarder has the deck for, I think, less than 90 tickets. So if you want to get that, grab it. And to us, that's really like a big thing that we are getting that support from Card Hoarder, Wizards of the Coast, and Scott Monroe. Because without these three, all of this that you're seeing, like these awesome graphics that you see, these cool music tracks that we have custom created for all of this, the players like really taking out a lot of their time to play in this. This is what Wizards of the Coast, Card Hoarder, and Scott Monroe bring you. And I really want to point that out again. I've been using Card Hoarder for the better part of like 2 or 3 years, and the rental service is amazing. It's not like a thing of, oh, hey, Julian, you're shitting for anything. No, it's like it's what I've been using, and it's amazing. So definitely check them out. And if you want to grab that sweet burn deck, I think, like, Thomas, what would you say? If you have like 100 ticks, I mean, you might not be familiar with Magic Online Economy, but it's somewhat similar. Like, if you want to get a budget way to get into Legacy, what are the options that you have? You've got Burn. What else do you have?
You maybe have Merfolk. I think that we always considered like a good deck to start, because